Oysters, they have been important for thousands of years here in the Antrim coast area. Here in Glenarm there was a archaeological excavation and they found pits of old oyster shells, Australopithecus shells. That was back in Mesolithic times. They are an ecosystem engineer. They are important for water quality and water clarity, which benefits species that are in our waters. They are also brilliant for taking out nitrogen from the water, also carbon capture, which is really important nowadays. They bring so much biodiversity to the area and they create like a reef system. So they're really important in general all around. So we are using native oyster nurseries. So they are cages that are kept below the pontoons in marinas, and we have volunteers that come down every week and they measure the length, width and weight of the oysters, and that gives us good information to see how they're growing, and they will spawn their larvae and hopefully it'll make their way out onto the Antrim coast and build up populations to the levels they once were.
Ulster Wildlife are really the only people that are working on native oyster restoration in Northern Ireland. In the natural range itself, there's 95% less native oyster habitat than there was in the 1800s. And there's a concerted drive throughout Europe and the UK to restore these back to self-sustaining levels. We're starting with these small cage nursery systems that were designed by the Zoological Society about 5 or 6 years ago. So this is our second one in Glenarm. The first one was in Bangor, and this is our first attempt at some sort of restoration work. Yeah, the future looks bright. You know, we've got government behind us, we've got the public behind us, and it's just a matter of getting the work done now.
I'll be looking at like the mobile species that are found within the cages, and then the species that are found on the oysters themselves. I'm using it just through like manual handling, lifting them, inspecting them, and then I use the ROV to go down and look at species that are found within the cage, like mobile. So that's talking about like fish. We found some common eels, which actually aren't very common, you know, red listed. And I'm just sort of looking at how I can compare the species found in the man-made cage to the species that are found in oysters in the wild.
I'm mainly working on using copper in trying to prevent or reduce biofouling in cages. So in our first marina in Bangor, we had a lot of biofouling on, and it meant that we were wasting a lot of time trying to get that off between actually measuring the oysters. So we're trialling it out here on the cages where we're putting copper on them and seeing if basically that reduces the amount of stuff that's growing on them. So the idea is that will let water continuously flow through them, and whenever they do spawn, it means that the spawn can leave the cages and spread out further.
My project is the history of the native oyster in Northern Ireland, and the main aim was to supply relevant information to really enhance the restoration work that Ulster Wildlife's doing. So by looking into where a lot of the native beds used to be, you can grasp a lot of information from that, and that can be used to choose sites like Glenarm. So for example, in Neolithic times, Glenarm used to have a very large shell midden, and excavations have been done, and that has really provided information that there was historical beds here, there can be beds here again, they just need a little help along the way.
Everybody talks now about their carbon footprint and try to be ecologically friendly, and sure, what could be more ecologically friendly than nature's very own filter? So yeah, I think it's brilliant. And I think that a lot of the locals have got involved in the project because Ulster Wildlife are here once a week, and there's always lots of locals and lots of helpers come down with them. So I think everybody's excited to see it. It's a fantastic project. The oysters filter the water, keep it clean, and they take out the microplastics and all the bad things. And we're hoping that they will maybe spawn out, well, there might be oyster beds out along the coast somewhere in the next few years, with a bit of luck. We have a lot of wildlife, and these oysters have added to it. And certainly if it's going to help the marina itself, yeah, it's all good. And they should definitely put them in other marinas, definitely, aye.
Once upon a time in Northern Ireland, in our 5 sea lochs, we have prolific fisheries here. So we would have seen, large oyster beds. The fisheries were deemed collapsed in 1903 in certain parts of Northern Ireland. So here at Ulster Wildlife, we really want to try and bring those oysters back. It's important to have our native species in our waters, and they provide so many ecosystem services.
The nursery projects have been really successful. We've had a lot of larval dispersal, a lot of larval settlement. We've collected on spot collectors, but this is really just a small scale. This is sort of a phase one in restoration. What we really want to do is seabed deployment and actually create a reef environment of oysters in their thousands, not in their hundreds. So we have plans to do seabed deployment on an old public oyster ground that was fished out in the 1800s. The hope is that we can create a native oyster bed in Northern Ireland, bring one back that's been missing for hundreds of years. We should get a huge increase in biodiversity within that site over the years. Improvements to the local water quality. It'll create a nursery ground for small fish and crustaceans. Hopefully in years to come this will become like a food station then for larger demersal fish and larger crustaceans. So it's a really good way of bringing nature back. We are bringing it back.